We've been talking about data mapping, then we spoke a lot about data mapping and integration with privacy impact assessments. I just tried to pick up a real world example to show how data mapping and PIA together can help this fintech firm to provide better and safer services to their customers. Welcome to my YouTube channel where you daily see new content on data privacy. And as I said, let's see an example, a real world example where a fintech company used the mapping with PIAs and tried to provide a much more safer service to their customers. So what is data mapping? We talked about this earlier. It's a process of identifying what data do we have in our organization. And since we are talking about privacy, so what personal data we have in the organization. Identify the data, categorize it, and track it as to from where does it originate, from where does it get collected, to moving on to being stored and processed and finally shared with third parties, or finally getting deleted, right? So all these processes get covered under the title of processing personal information as defined by the DPDP Act 2023. Now, we are talking of a fintech company. They were preparing a mobile payment app. So, of course, they'll be collecting a lot of information, for example, user registration. And the moment user registration would happen, there would be information coming in, payment details, transactions themselves. And the app also provided them to track their expenses on the app, right? So, when it comes to collecting this kind of information, it actually is capturing all sorts of information, personal information about individuals, their payment information, their financial habits in terms of their expenses and transactions. So it is important for them to conduct a PIA before launching the service. And when they did the PIA, they looked at the data being collected, data points being collected, and they realized that first of all, there's a lot of personal information because user is getting registered. His name, his address, his phone number, his email ID. These are some basic ones. If the user is getting registered and you are looking for creating a safer registry or safer login, then you will use the biometric also, right? On top of it, sensitive PII like payment information is also getting collected. Banking information, card information would stay inside the system. The device from which they are logging in, the network from which they are logging in from time to time needs to be trapped so that if in case there is a dispute later on, then that can be handled by trying to locate from where the transaction happened. And if they are chatting or talking to customer support, then again there would be some interaction, so some details being exchanged over there through the chat application. Data flows visualization is required to be done. What data is being collected, who has the access to it, how is it being processed, and finally where is it getting stored. These four types of information is very, very important. There's another information which is very important, which is the data being shared with the third party and how. In this case, it is not being shared with the third party, so that didn't come up as a question. So here are the real scenarios, the real scene where we are now talking of identifying the privacy risk. So user registration, you are collecting a lot of his personal information, but you can be safer by doing or applying your mind towards data minimization. For example, there could be some pieces of information that you don't need on a financial services site. Could be family information, for example. You don't need that. You don't need the nominee's photograph or too much of details of the nominee. Payment processing information you definitely need. It could be multiple locations, so the breach risk would increase. Location tracking is also very important because being financial transactions, what if it is required to troubleshoot and you're not able to find the proper locations? Third-party APIs, the data being shared with payment processors and fraud detection services. Data retention and data deletion. Is there a policy of how you are going to retain the data? For how long? And what would happen to data when you don't want to retain it? What would be the criteria of a financial company when they don't want to retain the data? It's only when the user is completely disconnected. That means he has stopped all operations with you. And then you need to have a timeline that has to be defined that if he stops all operations with us, he closes all the accounts with us, how many years do we still want to retain his personal information, his transaction details with us? So this will help define the risks. Then mitigations, no excessive data. As I said on the previous slide, I don't need the family details. I don't need the family photographs. I would pick up the financial information, but I'll use tokenization and encryption to ensure that it is safe. right? Even the storage could be PCI DSS compliant. I would need a consent to track the location of the user whenever the user logs it. So these are the privacy things. You generally say it is understood, that well, I want to know, capture the details of the transaction. So I'm saying that I need to have the location, but then you need to take consent, right? Are there any third-party contracts, vendor contracts that are happening there? And retention and deletion policies for each of the type. DPDP Act says e-commerce delete the customer data if he has not responded or not purchased anything new for last 3 years. Right? Just an example. So GDPR says data should be minimized, user consent should be taken for tracking, and data subject rights should be taken care of, right to access, correct, and erasure. CCPA says there should be transparency in every action. You should opt out for data sales and you have the right to get your data deleted. DPDP Act says it's data fiduciaries' responsibilities. Data has to be localized within the Indian geography, Indian users, and explicit user consent mechanism has to be adopted. Right. So these are some of the important aspects that these regulations define. And if you have done data mapping, it's easy to, especially with respect to data subject rights, you can easily allow them to or easily fetch their data when they want to access or erase their data. What are the benefits that they achieved out of this entire exercise? They were able to identify the risks very, very proactively, right? What extra data are they collecting? Is it sensitive? Yes, they know it is sensitive. So they need to make sure that it is PCI DSS compliant storage being used, financial information, best possible encryption being used. They should strengthen their data protection measures, and they ensured compliance with multiple regulations, and all this enhanced transparency and user trust. Forget about privacy only. When I go to a hospital and they say we are JCI compliant, I believe there is a process that JCI has a standard, and this hospital follows that. So the kind of working the hospital should give should definitely be a good, proper working of the hospital. So that's a real world example of integrating data mapping and PIA to get better results out of data mapping to provide more safer working to the users. I hope you like the content of my video. Please press the bell and the like icon, subscribe to my channel, and share your feedback in the comment section. Thank you.